Hey, welcome back. Today we're looking at Elegy, episode 22 of season 4. We are getting so close to that season finale. Debuting May 4th, 1997, Elegy follows Mulder and Scully as they're investigating the murders of multiple women and the strange connection to a man with autism. The episode begins at Angie's Midnight Bowl, which is a terrible name because it's not even midnight and they're already closed. Angelo, the owner, tells Harold, his employee, to hurry the hell up and go home, forgetting for a brief second that Harold is on the spectrum and likes to do things a certain way. Harold does listen, but Angelo notices that something isn't quite right with one of the lanes. The bloody balls are supposed to be in lane 3.
Oh God. Oh my God.
Alright, so that's kind of terrifying, but it reminds me of the way a fish opens its mouth when it's out of water. Now obviously, bowling alleys aren't supposed to have dead ghost girls, so who do you think Angelo's gonna call? Nobody, because the police just so happened to arrive at that exact moment.
That's her. That's the girl I saw.
If this girl was dead out on the street, then why would she be haunting a nearby bowling alley? At least we know who Angelo's gonna call now. Something tells me Scully had to get her shoes from the children's section. Now it sure is convenient that the ghost girl and her blood are both missing by the time the agents arrive on the scene. It's almost as if Angelo has something to hide. Now this might come as a shocker, but Scully is a bit skeptical about Angelo's claims.
What is that look, Scully?
I would have thought that after 4 years you'd know exactly what that look was.
What, you don't believe in ghosts?
Mulder, there's no such thing as ghosts or psychokinesis.
Mulder doesn't think this ghost is actually a ghost, more of a death omen, a spirit being that shows itself as a warning of someone's death. Then he just casually bowls a strike, which seems to impress Scully. If she thinks that's impressive, then she should have been here when I bowled a perfect game in Wii Bowling.
Nice throw!
Anyways, this murder/ghostly sighting is the third time this has happened in the past 3 weeks, so it can't be a coincidence. Mulder then pours coke all over the alley and discovers someone scratched the words, "She is me." I hope he doesn't make Angelo clean that up. All of these recent murders have all been women with the same height, weight, hair color, you name it, and all within 6 blocks of each other. So this can't be a very difficult crime to solve, no? Most criminals are pretty stupid, and I would say it's highly likely the murderer lives somewhere in the area.
Hey, you in the back, are we boring you?
No, not at all.
You know, it has been a while since local police treated Mulder and Scully like crap. Mulder, of course, has to bring up the ghost angle that everyone else seems to be glossing over, and Scully gives her classic "please shut up, Mulder" look. He also mentions the words "she is me," which this guy claims were one of the victim's last words. Well, kind of. Her throat was cut, so she couldn't exactly talk, but the person that made the anonymous 911 call sure could, and that's what they said. Obviously, as police, there's no reason to follow up on leads that might solve the case. So instead they give Mulder the number that made the call, which leads the agents to a psychiatric center. Isn't this guy supposed to be conducting a train? He probably lost that job after it exploded. The agents ask a group staying at the center if they placed the call or recognize the girl in the photo.
And does anybody recognize this man?
Oh, yes, he did it.
I also agree that Jay Leno is likely the one responsible for the murders. Mulder points out Harold was not raising his hand, which is all the reasoning he needs to have a one-on-one with the man. Scully discovers something weird when she notices the rings on all the victims were switched to the opposite hand, which means what exactly? The agents speak to Harold, and I kind of feel bad for the guy. I seriously can't see how this guy could hurt anyone.
Have you ever seen a ghost, Harold?
No.
Maybe not the best question to be asking someone in this situation, Mulder. Scully does a little more digging into Harold's background, and now she thinks he might be the person responsible for the murders.
He has been diagnosed with severe ego-dystonic obsessive-compulsive disorder, which would explain the switching of the victim's rings.
Mulder isn't quite as convinced that Harold is the murderer, but he still believes that Harold was the one that placed the 911 call. Scully points out that Harold works at the bowling alley, which could explain the connection there, but it doesn't explain Angelo claiming he saw a ghost. We also need to be reminded of Scully's cancer because we are closing in on the season finale. Well, that wasn't there a second ago. Alright, Scully, now remember, you don't believe in ghosts.
Mulder, there's no such thing as ghosts or psychokinesis.
Mulder comes in the bathroom, politely I might add, to inform Scully that they found another victim, a college student with her throat cut. Wait, you mean this college student? I wonder what's going through Scully's head at this exact moment. She just saw this girl in the bathroom and now here she is dead. Mulder is starting to think that Harold has something to do with this because he escaped his room shortly after the agents left. Scully then uses her nosebleed as an excuse to distance herself a bit. I think she's just too shaken up to admit to Mulder what she just witnessed. Meanwhile, poor Harold is being tormented by the spirits of all the slain women.
We've spoken about your fear. You've been afraid to express it to others, to Agent Mulder.
Scully speaks to the Bureau's therapist or psychiatrist and opens up about how she's been feeling lately with regards to her cancer. Even though Scully does talk highly of Mulder, I think she could open up to him about these things if she really wanted to. She talks about how much he's been there for her and how much she's relied on him, and if anyone is going to listen to her when she talks about seeing things, it's going to be him. In the meantime, Mulder's back at the bowling alley looking for Harold because he thinks Harold may be involved with the murders. Obviously, Harold is going to run. I mean, he's scared. He's seen things he'd rather not, and dealing with the FBI can be really stressful for just about anyone. Harold's brought in, and at least Mulder is there with him because this other guy is a huge prick and possibly the worst interrogator I've ever seen.
Harold, there are people who think that you murdered these women. I'm not one of them. But I need your help for me to prove that.
Mulder sure has flip-flopped a few times on this case. He brings Harold back to the bowling alley so they can find something, though even Mulder isn't 100% sure what it is they're looking for. What they find is a wall in the back room covered in score sheets, including those from the victims which Harold has completely memorized. I'm not sure how this proves or disproves that Harold committed the murders though. Harold sees the ghost of Angelo, which isn't a good thing, and he runs off to find him. When Mulder arrives, paramedics are already on the scene, but as quickly as all this happened, they've already given up on trying to bring him back. Luckily, his corpse still seems to have a pulse though. A praying Scully is interrupted by Mulder, who has to see her right now, because this is too important to wait for the morning.
I don't understand.
Harold saw an apparition, what may have been Angie Pintero's disembodied soul at the moment of or just prior to his death.
Mulder came over to see Scully because he needed her medical expertise, and the first thing he brings up is Harold seeing a ghost.
Right.
He does have a theory as to how Harold and Angelo both saw ghosts, and he thinks because they are both dying. Angelo saw the ghost of the girl only a day or two before his heart attack killed him, and now Mulder needs Scully to examine Harold to see if he is too. What Mulder doesn't know is Scully saw an apparition as well, so if his theory is correct, this would mean Scully doesn't have much time left, and that would be a very big pill for her to swallow. At the psychiatric center, Harold is being held so they can do a little checkup on him and give him his medication.
Take your poison, Harold. Go on.
You know, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Nurse Ratched here might have something to do with all these murders. There really needs to be a better screening process when it comes to positions that deal with the more vulnerable, because she's kind of a huge bitch. Mulder arrives at the center, and as soon as he does, the crazed nurse screams and claims Harold attacked her. If Harold did attack her, I wouldn't blame him and would say it's well deserved. Mulder doesn't think Harold was trying to kill the nurse and goes off to the bowling alley to find him, while Scully sticks around to question his friend Chuck. What the hell is she up to?
He's dying, isn't he? Her sin is she's trying to poison him.
So Chuck tells Scully that the nurse has been putting poison in Harold's medication, which is why he hasn't been taking it. On top of that, he shows Scully a book with photos of the murdered women that Harold seemed to have a little crush on, which is a little weird and suspicious, but it gets weirder when Chuck tells Scully that the only other person that knows about the photos is the nurse. So just what the hell is going on? I know this scene is supposed to be tense, but I can't help but laugh when Scully has to kick the ass of an old woman. I'd watch an entire series where Scully fights an old lady at the end of every episode. Nurse Ratched didn't seem to understand that hot lead is quicker than a scalpel. Unfortunately, Harold was found dead, likely because he wasn't taking his medication. But why was the nurse doing all this to begin with? Was she jealous that Harold loved these women and not her? Or was it because, like Scully mentions, Harold was happy and this happiness was something she would never have again? It's a strange motive, but people have done far worse for far less.
I saw something, Mulder.
What?
There's a rather tense moment between Mulder and Scully when Scully reveals what she saw. Mulder gets a little upset with her because she's hiding things from him, but I think it's more so because he's scared of what the implications mean. If Scully saw an apparition like she claims, then like all the others, this means she doesn't have much life left in her. And I think at this point, losing Scully would be a bigger devastation for Mulder than even losing his own sister. Elegy is a solid Monster of the Week episode that I think does a good job weaving in Scully's cancer arc. We are nearing the end of the season, so this plotline needs to be ramped up. I like Harold's character, and like Roland, I think the actor does a pretty good job playing someone with autism. It's not perfect, but it's not as bad as Tracy.
I can. When I dream.
I read an older review on the episode that complained about the trope of people with developmental disabilities having superpowers, but I don't really see that with Harold. Yeah, he was able to memorize the bowling scores, but having been around someone who's autistic, they were able to remember the most obscure facts and spit them out at a moment's notice. So I don't think memorizing bowling scores is necessarily out of the realm of possibilities. Obviously, Hollywood does treat autism like it's some superpower. Remember that awful Predator movie that claimed it was the next step in human evolution? That may have been the dumbest plot I've ever seen in any movie, period. Now, if the reviewer was referring to Harold's ability to see ghosts, then they weren't paying attention because anyone that was dying could see them. So it wasn't something that was unique to him. As much as I do enjoy the episode, the whole she is me thing is never really explained, and the whole story is sort of just revealed and wrapped up within the last 3 minutes or so. There were no hints that the nurse was involved until near the end, when she's suddenly evil and trying to convince Harold that his medication was poison so he wouldn't take it. Her motives are vague at best, and it does kind of end on a whimper. Still though, I get a chuckle every time I see Scully fight her. The episode was written by John Sheban, who in my opinion isn't one of the stronger writers on the show, though I think so far this is one of his best efforts. The idea all came about when John had written down the words haunted bowling alley on an index card and placed it on his bulletin board, where it sat for over a year before it was finally used for this episode. For those not in the know, the writers on the show would write down ideas on index cards and place them on bulletin boards, and when they'd get together, the best ideas would get chosen and they would grow from there. It wasn't until Scully's cancer diagnosis in Memento Mori where John finally decided to use his haunted bowling alley idea. An incident with his father-in-law helped change the idea from a bowling alley inhabited by apparitions to the idea that people who are on the verge of death can see things that the rest of us cannot. 10 years prior to writing the episode, John and his then girlfriend were visiting with her father, who was in the hospital and very ill. And in John's own words, her father, Jerry Tanner, was dying of lung cancer. Janet and I weren't married yet, but we were going together, and we went to visit him in his hospital room. This was near the end, and he was very sick. Jerry kept looking away from us, then at Janet, and then he said, "How many people are in the room?" My wife said, "There's just me and John." And then he looked over to the other side of the room, then looked back to us, and finally said, "Okay." This experience stuck with John for years, and just before the Christmas break, Chris Carter asked what he was working on next. To which John told him his idea about people on the brink of death who can see through cracks to the other side. Chris Carter thought it was an excellent idea and would work really well for Scully. The second half of the story would be largely inspired by the book and film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. John was a big fan of the book and wanted to incorporate elements of it into his story. He was such a big fan that they even cast Sidney Lassick, the actor who played Cheswick in the film, for the part of Chuck.
May I have my cigarettes, please, Miss Ratched?
You sit down, Mr. Cheswick, and wait your turn.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'm just a human being.
Stephen M. Porter would play Harold and was a friend of Frank Spotnitz's going back to their days in UCLA. Stephen had acted in a play called Asylum back in the day and used some of that experience along with the tics he had learned while preparing for that role for this audition. Stephen was unsure if he had impressed Chris Carter or if he had just made a fool of himself. But because of his research into mannerisms that people with these conditions use, such as stimming, he was given the role. Back to the bowling alley, but the main reason why John wanted to do a haunted bowling alley in the first place was because of his father. When his father was a young man, he worked in a bowling alley, and when John was growing up, he would tell him all these stories about what went on, and it just fascinated John. The Thunderbird Bowling Center in Vancouver was rented out for the shoot, but cast and crew were under strict guidance that they must wear bowling shoes at all times, or if they happened to run out, then paper booties would be required on their feet. One of David's least favorite things about the shoot was after the bowling scene, his arm was really sore the following day, and he realized he might not be as young as he used to be. What really happened is David and the episode's director Jim Charleston were having a few games between setup, with Jim claiming David owes him $80. David responded by saying, "That's 80 Canadian. I owe him a lot less than he thinks. I mean, it's true, our money is worth nothing, but ouch, David." Unfortunately, it seems like the bowling alley went up for sale in 2018, and it doesn't appear if it's around anymore. There's a funny blooper from the gag reel where someone calls the bowling alley while they're filming, and David answers it.
It might be crazy, but...
Let me get that.
Get that.
Hello? Yeah, it is. We're closed today, though, because the X-Files is filming. But we'll be open again. When, Friday? Yeah, we'll be open again on Friday. You watch that show? Yeah, don't miss it. Okay, bye.
Elegy currently sits at 7.8 on IMDb, and despite some of the issues I have with it, I think it's fairly solid overall, and I'd probably go with a 7. Next up, an amnesiac Mulder is found covered in blood and possibly responsible for several murders in the episode Demons. So what do you think of Elegy? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today, folks. I hope you're having a great day and stay spooky.
Fox main events Sunday.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
No! The countdown continues.
I saw something, Mulder.
What?
With new episodes.
She is me. Is that what they're trying to tell you?
You can't miss.
Stay where you are! Drop it! Yeah!
And the new X-Files Sunday at 9, 8 Central on Fox.